Greetings, citizens of the world.
This is Virtual Verity.
We are anonymous.
It has cameras and sensors.
It's a podcast.
And there's another front opening in Israel's war against Hamas. Cybersecurity experts are warning that international hackers are increasingly targeting Israeli websites and infrastructure.
He's saying thus far cyber component hasn't been that significant. It has been more of these denial of service elements.
He says he's tracking more than 40 groups conducting attacks that disrupted more than 80 Israeli websites for both government and news agencies since the start of the war.
I'm Mark Bruno, a cybersecurity and conflict analyst. This is Virtual Verity, where I discuss topics at the nexus of technology, InfoSec, open source intelligence, and modern conflict. And today, we're going to be talking about how the fighting in Israel has been reflected in cyberspace. I know mainstream, non-cybersecurity news has bitten on this one far more than they usually do, and that's actually one of the main reasons why I wanted this to be the first topic we covered, and so we could clear up some of the static. Before we get to that, though, I just wanted to hit on a handful of the recent topics that have been hanging in the air regarding the cyber and information operations gray zone. For this first one, I'm going to kind of combine two stories. So the chiefs of the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, which is US, UK, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, they've been issuing a lot of statements the past 2 weeks regarding Chinese threat actors, particularly in the realm of intellectual property theft. It echoes a lot of the concerns outlined last month by several US federal departments regarding IP vulnerability to North Korean infiltration. However, what makes this statement stand out is that it has a strong condemnation directly pointed at the Chinese government for what they say is extensive theft of industrial and academic research. FBI Director Christopher Wray said in a related October 18th statement to Reuters that, quote, China has long targeted businesses with a web of techniques all at once: cyber intrusions, human intelligence operations, seemingly innocuous corporate investments and transactions. Every strand of that web has become more brazen and more dangerous. In the interview, the director also accused China of having the, quote, largest hacking program in the world by a country mile. The warnings also included an assertion that AI was enabling the espionage, and predictably, a statement by the Chinese embassy denies the accusations. On October 30th, President Joe Biden unveiled a sweeping executive order regarding artificial intelligence. It's been heralded as the most significant action any government's ever taken regarding artificial intelligence. That said, it looks like the mandate won't have much power behind it unless there's cooperation from the currently very disorganized US Congress and cooperation from international bodies. The order mandates comprehensive standards across federal agencies for AI safety, procurement, and deployment, extending its scope to private AI projects through the Defense Production Act, which critics have called shaky legal grounds. As pointed out in a somewhat critical article by Wired Magazine's Matt Laszlo, is the US in a national crisis caused by AI on the level of a war or a global pandemic? The move mandates U.S. tech firms to disclose sensitive details of crucial AI projects to the federal government before they're able to go live. At the time of recording, Vice President Kamala Harris should be at the UK AI Safety Summit to promote this vision internationally. There's a lot to this next one, so I'll try to just go over it as briefly as I can. So the ICC, the International Criminal Court in The Hague, sustained some sort of cyber attack at the end of September. Now, as far as we knew at the time, no data had been stolen. All they could say was that services had been taken down, possibly in some sort of DDoS attack. But there's a lot of interesting stuff surrounding this situation. So obviously right now, they are investigating a number of war crimes allegedly committed by Russia in Ukraine and Africa. And Russia has an extremely storied history with the ICC and famously launching cyber attacks and attempts to infiltrate. This has been going on to public knowledge at least since the beginning of the war with Ukraine in 2014. And the most high profile cases regarding this were during the MH17 investigations. It's a lot to get into, and it honestly merits its own episode or series of episodes. So why this is news, despite the fact that it happened on September 21st, is that last week, the ICC issued an update regarding the situation, calling it unprecedented. As I alluded to before, that'd be quite the accusation, considering the number of times there have been direct cyber attacks attributed to Russia alone on the ICC. A quote from the statement reads as follows: "The evidence available thus far indicates a targeted and sophisticated attack with the objective of espionage. The attack can therefore be interpreted as a serious attempt to undermine the court's mandate." I'll say it one more time that we don't officially know yet if it was Russia, and that we don't know the extent of the damage. There have been a number of statements over the years by the ICC about how they expected events like this to occur and how cyber operations are expected to impact future investigations by the court. The lead prosecutor, Karim Khan, has gone on record several times on the issue. He even put an article himself out related to the subject on Digital Frontlines just a few weeks before the incident. You can check it out if you want to. One last breadcrumb I'll leave about this event: in a seemingly unrelated Reuters interview with the head of the State Service of Special Communications and Information Protection of Ukraine, the SSCIP, they warned that attacks against legal bodies investigating war crimes in Ukraine itself were happening with alarming regularity. The agency produced a coinciding report with the interview, and the statement by the ICC was issued less than a day before this interview with the Ukrainian State Service chair. Okay, so cyber warfare occurring in Israel. As I said up top, I wanted to get into this one because I feel there's been quite a bit of misinformation and perhaps some overstating of certain incidents because of what outlets have chosen to cover it and the way that they've chosen to frame it. What we're seeing happening in this fight between Israel and Hamas in the cyber domain isn't totally new. A lot of it echoes what's happened in Ukraine since February of last year. But what I personally find unique about the situation in Israel and Gaza is that, unlike events in Ukraine, which by and large actually have been more significant to kinetic developments, they're being covered, the events in Israel, by significantly smaller outlets, even local news stations and public access in the US. I think anybody who's tried to cover cyber operations or hacktivism in any sort of journalistic capacity understands that analyzing and responding to claims of cyber attacks is often extremely exhausting. If you were to take every hacktivist statements on their face, or, on either side of most of these conflicts, you'd have to report a serious incident literally every single minute. A good account to follow on Twitter or X, as it is now referred to, for getting some insight into a lot of these claims would be one called CyberKnow. This isn't my ringing endorsement of the accounts reporting, but they do demonstrate the amount of claims that are made in a lot of these situations. According to them, 137 groups claiming they have engaged in some sort of action on either side, either in favor of Israel or in favor of Palestinians, some of them exclusively in favor of Hamas or Hezbollah. 137 groups have claimed some sort of action since the 7th of October. And you can see also in this account how many different petty squabbles these groups seem to get into. So, like I said, sometimes you're dealing with individuals who might be literally teenagers who get lucky and might be able to conduct some sort of DDoS attack on a website. Maybe they take it down for a few minutes, and there you go, claimed as a cyber attack. Now, some of these groups have actually had some success taking down serious systems or valuable websites to the Israeli public, and we'll get into that as we go along. I'm going to try to keep it relatively chronological. But when we focus on all of these different threat actors and all these incidents, we tend to lose sight of the fact, or often forget, that there is a completely different layer to cyber warfare here, but neither Israel nor Iran are any strangers to. As far as state-backed cyber warfare goes, both of these countries are considered heavyweights. Now, the only thing is, when dealing with state actors or advanced persistent threats that have some state backing, or just more experienced cyber criminals, is that they don't want to be detected. They don't want people to know what they're doing. There is no, let's use a famous Russian example, Sandworm. Sandworm doesn't have a PR department. Sandworm doesn't have a Telegram channel where they're telling people, oh, look what we did over here. No, they don't want people to know what they're doing, because a lot of the stuff they're doing is data exfiltration or long game espionage operations in the cyber domain. I think the real picture of what's going on regarding cyber warfare in Israel has yet to be told and will not be told for quite some time. And by the way, there are some advanced persistent threats, some serious heavy hitter threat actors that are based in Gaza that we haven't heard a whole lot from. So I'm going to try to break that down as well as I go into this deep dive. There's a lot to the history of cyber warfare, surveillance, and espionage with Israel regarding its relations within and without its borders. We'll cover some of the events leading up to the eruption of the violence on October 7th and what's happened since. I'll do my best to cover the most obvious ideological poles of the actors involved. I'll do my best not to oversimplify, but there's always a threat of that when you're trying to summarize such a complicated situation. The factions get really messy. I won't be able to cover all of it. I'm hoping I'll be able to rope in an expert at some time in the future as we get more information and, perhaps I get a little more clout. And if anybody else is wondering why I haven't mentioned the Israeli surveillance state, there is a whole article on the website, themolach.com, and a whole episode planned regarding Pegasus and Israeli surveillance. So now that I've given you a caveat of a caveat of a caveat with a disclaimer to get you started, now we can begin. There were several notable cybersecurity incidents in the weeks leading up to the attacks on 7th October. On the 9th of September, 15 Israeli lawmakers were surprisingly banned from WhatsApp and what may have been a breach that stemmed from their authentication controls being tripped. So think about it, it's like if you try to sign in from a different location too many times, get a password wrong, whatever. The report said that they were locked out of their accounts for 3 hours, which, anybody who's worked with any sort of data theft or exfiltration stuff before, this is enough time to do some harm, especially if you're just trying to scrape the files or messages out of, a WhatsApp account. The particular incident was reminiscent of a 2019 phone breach of Netanyahu's famous political rival, Benny Gantz. The incident was explained in the Israeli press as an attempt by Iran, though I didn't see any corroborating evidence provided by the Israeli press or the Israeli government. Maybe this is me just being lazy, not doing my homework, but there wasn't a threat actor named. There was no campaign reference. There was no malware named. They just simply said that it was Iran. So I do take it with a bit of a grain of salt. The facts on the table are that, 15 members, Israeli parliament, locked out of WhatsApp for 3 hours. Cyber Avengers, a group that's going to come up a few times, started a campaign on September 16th against the Israeli railway services that ended with a data leak where they tried to sell off an undisclosed amount of data that they wanted for a total of 4 Bitcoins, which at the time of this recording is quite a bit of money. On September 20th, Ben Gurion Airport, the major airport in Tel Aviv, which is also a major target in the conflict. The airport was attacked with rockets numerous times after the 7th of October. So it had one of its most significant disruptions in its entire history because of a cyber attack on the 20th of September. And this went really underreported and involved an extremely sophisticated disruption of GPS systems that impacted the abilities of pilots to land on certain runways at the airport itself. The identity of the threat actor hasn't been revealed. I imagine something this advanced, it'll be some time before that gets revealed because of political sensitivity or because of the skill in, avoiding attribution by the threat actor themselves. But this is much more closely associated with the sort of APT behavior we might see from a nation-state threat actor. And then on the 5th of October, 2 days before the outbreak, there was a report of an attempt via Telegram to hack the Israeli president, Isaac Herzog. The findings by Israel's Shin Bet security service said that it was probably from a lower level group for the purpose of scamming the president rather than any serious breach. However, I think anybody who knows the history of major cyber attacks would tell you that a lot of them start with phishing, with, just somebody clicks the wrong link in the wrong email that works for the wrong company, and there, billions of dollars in damage happen. It's also curious that the same day, Microsoft issued a report from their threat intelligence department, and in it they talk about threats posed by Iran, who obviously Israel considers to be their number one adversary in most domains. However, I should note that the threat intelligence report specifically highlighted Iran's activities in influence operations in the global south and in what many might consider underdeveloped countries. Now I'm going to start going down the list of events that have unfolded since everything broke out on the 7th. I just wanted to say thank you to the CyberKnow Substack, Dave Bittner's Cyberwire Daily, which is one of my favorite short form podcasts, and Cyfirma's Cybersecurity Consultants blog for pointing me in the right direction for some of these days and events where I was uncertain exactly how they'd landed. Because again, all of the mixed reporting on these situations really led to a lack of clarity, especially in the first few days things were happening. So I hope to give you as accurate of a timeline as I possibly can. Hey, this is just a message from Future Mark as I'm going through finishing up the episode. I realized that the timeline segment takes about 15 minutes to get through, and it's literally just me naming threat actors, events, and discounting or affirming claims. So if that sounds like that might get a little dry or a little too repetitive for you, again, feel free to skip ahead. It's about a 15-minute section. On the 6th of October, Cyber Avengers struck again, this time allegedly launching a DDoS attack at the Noga Independent Systems Operator, specifically in the city of Yavne. Some have called this the start of activity related to the conflict, but if you look at the history of their statements, it seems like it was an unrelated campaign. So Noga is as I understand, they manage several power stations and power grids throughout both Israel and Palestine. And a video that was included with the threats shows some sort of power failure on a street that I presume is somewhere in Israel. It's not really clear. It looks like an old video. And while the video itself had been circulated on the night of the 7th and the 8th as proof that Israeli cities were under cyber attack, the statements included by Cyber Avengers don't seem to allude to anything related to what would actually happen on the morning of the 7th. I'm very cautious because some organizations have claimed that this was it, this is the start, this is the smoking gun, showing that Cyber Avengers knew that violence was going to happen, but I am unconvinced. Part of the evidence that's cited by some of these security and OSINT bloggers, on October 5th, the group was asked via Telegram chat, what's the time of the operation? And the group replied 7 days ago. But then responded again, they were going to act on October 6th at 6 p.m. There's nothing that says to me that it was related to the violence that began the following morning. Then, eventually, October 7th, there were reports as early as 6:50 in the morning local time that Israel's Red Alert app, which is an application that tracks reports of rocket attacks in real time, had been taken down via some sort of DDoS. The earliest statements I could find came from Anonymous Sudan's Telegram account, though this doesn't necessarily indicate that the group was responsible. It would later be confirmed that the entity responsible was a non-ghost, who was able to exploit a flaw in the app's API. This attack in particular is probably the most interesting to me personally, because of all the ones conducted by these low-level threat actors, this one had the most direct impact on civilians. It's taking down any warning system that has the potential to increase the lethality of a rocket attack. I mean, I think this should be seen as an explicit attempt to harm normal people. The timing of this particular attack should be considered as well, because it came within an hour of the first reports that Hamas's attack had begun. On the night of the 7th, statements were published by several pro-Palestinian groups that attempted to claim responsibility for allegedly overwhelming number of servers associated with the Iron Dome missile defense system Well, I was able to confirm that some of the servers associated with Rafael Advanced Defense Systems and Israel Aerospace Industries may have been temporarily unable to access the internet. These are the organizations that manage some of the Iron Dome. There's nothing that substantively suggests that the system's performance was ever impacted. It contradicts rumors circulating at the time on social media that Iron Dome was being directly targeted by Iran, and I think anybody spreading rumors like that is just being extremely irresponsible. One last note I have about the 7th is that a number of outlets immediately started pointing the finger at Iran. Such high-profile outlets as the Wall Street Journal in particular published an article in the 7th that said, quote, "The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps gave the final go-ahead last Monday, as in October 2nd, in Beirut," end of quote. This was right at the top of this article on the Wall Street Journal. While there are certainly reasons to suspect Iran had a hand in some sort of indirect assistance to Hamas for the attack, I don't think I'm going to speculate so explicitly. Iran does have a relationship with Hamas, obviously, but I'm not qualified enough to confirm those sorts of specifics. And it seemed to me like perhaps it was a little too early to publish something like that. I can tell you a big problem with investigating a lot of this is literally just sifting through tweets and messages on Telegram, just people saying, oh, Iran did this, Iran did that. Putting that in the air, especially in this context where it's so unfiltered and people can sort of make whatever claims they want, it doesn't help. Moving on to events that happened on the 8th, Cyber Avengers once again claimed to have taken down Noga. Claims were repeated by mainstream press, and it turned out that most of the images they posted as proof were the same ones they published in their attacks on the 6th. The main website of the Jerusalem Post was taken down by an extremely effective DDoS attack. This might have been one of the highest profile events throughout this whole thing, especially in the first few days. This attack was attributed to Anonymous Sudan, though I've seen reports also attributing it to Cyber Avengers. Anonymous Sudan, much like their friends in Killnet, are happy to leave open-ended statements that could lead one to conclude that they had something to do with an event that they are drawing attention to. Speaking of the devil, Russian cybercriminals Killnet issued a statement on the 8th claiming that they would get involved in the conflict. Their stated reason was because of Israel's choice to support Ukraine during the Russian invasion. They were briefly able to DDoS the Israeli security service Shin Bet's website. Also on that day, a lot of groups claiming to intervene on the side of Israel began to make themselves known. Two notable ones were Garuna Ops and Indian Cyber Force. However, before anybody thinks that these might be some big heroes, it should be known that these groups would broadly be considered hacktivists at best and often cyber criminals in most other circumstances. For instance, Indian Cyber Force's immediate targets after the main Hamas website was the Palestinian government's email service and an online shopping portal. I'm sure that really put the hurt on those terrorists and definitely not regular people. Then their most famous campaign prior to this was in support of the assassination of Sikh leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar. But yeah, that was the famous case that was being talked about that had soured ties between Canada and India just a few weeks before these events. Then on October 9th, there was a bizarre storm of news reports echoing the claims made by Killnet. Because of the size of Killnet's following, a lot of misinformation was spread. Killnet's statements reached hundreds of thousands of accounts across Telegram and Twitter. Some OSINT accounts were happy to pick up on the hype and also claimed the group was Iranian, which only added to the confusion. And to verify, they could have just Googled Killnet. It would have taken them a few seconds, but whatever. Binance, in cooperation with the Israeli police, helped freeze crypto wallets attributed to Hamas. Several groups claimed to launch DDoS attacks against Binance, though it doesn't seem that anything came of it. On this day, it was alleged that a non-ghost was able to send fake red alert warnings to users, including a warning of a nuclear attack. I've seen the factuality of this statement go back and forth, whether it happened, whether it didn't. I'm going to say the fact that people were saying that it happened still caused the same amount of confusion that they wanted to, whether or not the fake warning was put out. Also on the 9th, Microsoft published findings in their digital defense report indicating that a cyber campaign that they had been investigating for a while, they dubbed Storm 1133, could be attributed to a Gaza-based threat actor that they did not name specifically. Targets from this campaign were unnamed Israeli energy and defense companies, as well as the West Bank's Fatah Party. Once again, Hamas is not Palestine. Not every Palestinian supports the same causes. We shouldn't have to keep saying this. On the 10th of October, several groups claimed that they were going to target industrial control systems, once again including Cyber Avengers, but with the help of Anonymous Sudan and SiegeSec. It seems that their attacks, if they even happened, completely failed. They did claim to show as proof of work footage from unsecured CCTV cameras. When I looked into it further, more of the supporting material that they provided as proof of work had been around for over a year. Cybersecurity organization Group IB Threat Intelligence confirmed that the material associated with Mikorot as part of this proof of work was actually from a threat actor from 2 years ago known as Moses Staff. On this afternoon, the threat actor Anon Ghost asked for volunteers to assist in targeting several internet portals for booking flights out of Israel. So with this, they're trying to keep people trapped at an airport, was still routinely being attacked with rockets. This attack also kind of struck me in a way, not just in, the brazenness of the intent, but also in kind of like the short-sightedness, because if you actually want to keep people stuck at the airport, people can just pay for tickets while they're there. So what are they actually trying to do? Then on a Russian language forum, an entity known as Blackfield claimed to have PII of numerous IDF soldiers and Shin Bet personnel. Blackfield indicated this information could be leveraged in future attacks or disinformation efforts and suggests that similar actions be taken against US targets. Then on the 11th, the Israeli National Cyber Directorate finally acknowledged the extent of the different cyber campaigns and threats manifesting. A 2-page report was distributed with an updated list of procedures for individuals and organizations that suspect that they've been a victim of one of these attacks. Frankly, it's just a little strange that it took, this is the 5th day into the operation that they'd have anything to say about this. On the same day, the Jerusalem Post finally came back online. It was their first full day of operation. Anon Ghosts and Team Insane Pakistan successfully defaced or temporarily knocked out dozens of Israeli government portals. I was able to check a lot of these myself. The Cyber Directorate claims that these attacks had limited real impact, which I also believe. Now, the 12th is an interesting day because I consider it a turning point. At this point, a lot of the nature of the attacks kind of changed. DDoS attacks were becoming a lot less effective. A lot of the attacks were now just starting to be claims, and I saw nothing to verify many of them, which is kind of in line with what Israeli authorities were saying. However, some of the attacks that did come at this point on took on a smarter and often more threatening or longer term vision. And even some of the lower effort attacks, like the different website defacements, changed in their nature from a pro-Palestinian or Palestinian liberation sort of perspective and more towards a straight-up anti-Semitic tone. So on the 12th, among the services attacked in the city of Holon was a series of public smart billboards that for an uncertain amount of time displayed a burning Israeli flag being replaced with a Palestinian banner. More rumors that these were billboards in Tel Aviv, not Holon, began to spread. By the 14th, the Red Alert service was fully restored in the browser version of the application. However, the issues caused by the various denial of service attacks caused the application to be removed from several regions' app stores. The natural workaround, which would be downloading the APK or IPA file and installing it directly, was anticipated by the threat actors who had made a bogus website for downloading these files that actually installed a malware variant of Red Alert. In response, the developer decided to just block all VPN and foreign traffic from using the application. On the 15th, another group, Anon Ghost Indonesia, claims to have leaked a database of an Israeli LGBTQ dating app and community project, posting the data on Pastebin. On the 16th, Israeli news outlets All Israel News and Abu Ali Express sustained DDoS attacks by your Anon T13X. By the 20th, a lot of the DDoS attacks appeared to be less focused and were just going after targets of opportunity. Threat actors from all over Asia seem to converge on the conflict. Estimates have the number of DDoS groups taking credit for attacks at 116. On the 21st, Israel's Burial Society website sustained a defacement claimed by a threat actor self-identifying as X7 Root. The site remained this way for most of the day. The defacement stood out in that it included a number of anti-Semitic and homophobic statements. The work of X7 Root has been amplified by groups Ghosts of Palestine and Team Insane Pakistan. On October 22nd, Tel Aviv's Sheba Medical Center was hit with a cyber attack, with much of its nature still undisclosed. Israel's health ministry severed remote network access to the medical center, with no group yet claiming responsibility for the incident. It's particularly a notable one, as most of the attacks we've seen up to this point would not require a containment protocol like this. As no groups claimed responsibility, there's a lot of room for speculation here. The next day, October 23rd, threat actor CyberDragons claims to release their biggest data leak so far, with containing PII of over 1 million Israeli citizens. Investigators at Sentinel-1, suspecting that most of this would be old data, actually found that a lot of it was new. Then, as of the time of this recording, the last big hurrah for DDoS attacks occurred on the 29th of October. Cyber Avengers claimed that they were going to target a number of water utilities throughout the country in the next 24 hours. The claim, while it circulated on a lot of social media, did not seem to actually pan out to any sort of substantive attack. The last two incidents that I want to bring attention to are two of the most interesting. On the 29th of October, a novel data wiper campaign was hitting Israel utilizing a malware known as BB Linux, obviously a reference to Bibi Netanyahu. Several cybersecurity publications are saying that the malware is definitely from a pro-Hamas group, but no threat actor was named. The extent of the malware's spread hasn't been disclosed as of time of recording. Israeli sources are claiming that the malware shows indications of being from an APT and is an advanced cyber weapon. Though I think it'll take more time to say just how serious the threat is, what it can do to an individual system is pretty nasty. It's designed to corrupt or wipe all the essential files and processes within a Linux system, potentially to cover up stolen data. And that leads me to the final addition that seemed worth mentioning. Just prior to releasing this recording, Palo Alto Network's Unit 42 released a report wherein they demonstrated that Iran-based APT, Agrius, has waged a protracted campaign against Israeli targets, including businesses and universities, which are the usual for stealing intellectual property, from at least January, and it might still be ongoing. The data targeted was mostly, again, IP and PII. As part of their operations, they use a number of wipers. It's unclear as of now, but it doesn't seem to be related to the BB Linux wiper. Everything about the malware utilized seems to be different at this point in time, though the purposes are certainly similar. So, if you got through all that, pat yourself on the back. I know it's a lot, but trust me, there was plenty that I left out for the sake of not getting too bogged down. As of the date of publication, this should be most of the highlights. So, who are these threat actors, these APTs that haven't shown themselves yet? Well, there are a number of higher-powered threat actors that Israel's Cyber Directorate has on their radar. Many of these are based in Iran and Lebanon. Some of them are based in the Palestinian territories as well. The first one, as we mentioned before, is Agrius, also known as Cobalt Shadow, Pink Sandstorm, or Agonizing Serpents. They've been around since 2020. And while they haven't been firmly linked to the Iranian government, we do know that they're from Iran, and their focus is normally on stealing intellectual property or PII, and then leaking it, usually to tarnish an organization's reputation. Next on the list is Cobalt Aztec, who is said to be Iranian state-sponsored. They're one of the utilizers of the Darkbit ransomware, which has been on the radar since December 2022. They usually execute ransomware campaigns, and interestingly enough, a lot of their operations, they try to be more disruptive rather than financially driven. They tend to target both private and public sector entities in Abraham Accords nations, which, would include adversaries to Iran, such as Saudi Arabia or Israel. This next one is one I just learned about in April of this year, Charming Kitten, also known as Mint Sandstorm. Their campaigns have taken them all over the world, and a lot of their activities focus on establishing covert backdoors. Most of their attacks begin with directed spear phishing campaigns. Their most recent campaign used a malware strain called Bella Ciao against several victims in the US, Europe, India, Turkey, and other countries. This next one, based out of Gaza, typically called Mole Rats, also Gaza Cyber Gang, Group 1, and Extreme Jackal. They're a politically driven group, usually focused on operations in the Middle East and North Africa. In recent years, though, they've been seen to expand into targets in the aerospace and defense industries in the US, UK, Canada, and several Middle Eastern countries. These are just a handful of the groups that Israel routinely has to contend with. When I hear about these attacks that happened, between September 9th and October 5th, that kind of got swept under the rug, that clearly utilize more advanced tool sets. These are the groups you need to be looking at. When you hear about a whole hospital network being quarantined by the government and there's nobody there to claim responsibility for the attack, this is the direction you should be looking in. Not Anonymous Sudan, not Anon Ghost, not Killnet, definitely not Killnet. So what's the big takeaway? I think it's crucial to differentiate between actual and perceived threats when dealing with the cyber realm, especially in the current Israeli scenario. While numerous claims circulate, Israeli services remain adept at identifying and thwarting such attacks. Despite the attention garnered by hacktivist groups such as Killnet or Anonymous Sudan, their direct harm is mitigated by a robust cybersecurity infrastructure. However, beneath this visible layer lies a more menacing one: the clandestine activities of state-affiliated groups and experience advanced persistent threats. The dual-layered nature of this cyber conflict necessitates a well-thought-out defense strategy, addressing immediate threats from hacktivist activities while proactively seeking and countering the potentially more dangerous silent moves by APTs. The unfolding situation underscores a modern warfare paradigm where battles transpire both openly and covertly in the digital domain, carrying real and tangible repercussions for security, civilian safety, and the on-the-ground situation. I can't speak to every domain in this conflict between Israel and Hamas. What I can say is that, even in the cyber realm, where allegedly no one has yet to die in the history of warfare, not enough is being done to protect innocent lives. It's my opinion that there is a lack of transparency and a lack of respect for the agency of regular people who didn't ask to be part of this. I'll leave it up to you to decide who I'm referring to here. Hey, thanks for listening. If you want to check out more of the work I'm doing with this project, you can go to virtualveritypod.com or themoloch.com. This should take you to the same place. Find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at MarkJBruno and It's Bruno, respectively. The Moloch blog should also be on Mastodon on the InfoSec exchange. You can shoot me an email at contact@themoloch.com. I'd love to hear what you thought of this pilot episode and what you'd like to see more or less of in the ones to come. All writing, editing, planning, and production is done by myself, Mark Bruno. All music is provided by Chris Delano.
Greetings, citizens of the world.
This is Virtual Verity.
We are anonymous.
It has cameras and sensors.
This podcast.
But it turns out someone else may have been watching too.
And just like your phones and social media apps.
And although it was a piece of malicious ransomware on the surface, the attack wasn't really about money.
We are Legion. We do not forgive.